He served his country with honor, surviving the dangers of the battlefield. But what he couldn't survive was what awaited him back home. A decorated Navy veteran, a life of service, and a brutal, untimely end. This is the disturbing reality behind today's case. What should have been a peaceful return to civilian life instead led to a nightmare that no one saw coming. In this video, we uncover the shocking case of a murdered Navy veteran, a crime that left investigators scrambling for answers, a community shaken, and a family desperate for justice. The tragic reality is that even those who have endured war zones are not always safe within their own communities. The case we're about to explore is more than just another true crime story. It's a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk behind closed doors, even in the lives of those who have dedicated themselves to protecting others. This case stands out not just because of the brutal nature of the crime, but also because of the unsettling twists in the investigation. Theories emerged, suspects were questioned, and secrets began to unravel, painting a picture more horrifying than anyone could have imagined. Was this a random act of violence? A targeted attack? Or something even more sinister? As we delve into this case, I want to remind you to subscribe to this channel if you're interested in true crime stories that expose the disturbing realities of the world we live in. By subscribing, you'll stay updated on our latest investigations into shocking crimes, cold cases, and unsolved mysteries. Also, don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Before we begin, a quick but important disclaimer. This video will discuss topics related to violent crime, including murder, potential motives, and police investigations. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. Our goal is to present the facts of this case in a respectful and informative manner, with no intent to sensationalize or disrespect those involved. With that said, let's begin unraveling the mystery behind the tragic death of a Navy veteran. A story that will leave you questioning just how well we truly know the people around us. The tragic murder of James "Jim" Calloway sent shockwaves through both the military and civilian communities. Jim wasn't just another name in the headlines, he was a decorated Navy veteran, a respected leader, and a man who had dedicated his life to serving his country and helping others. His sudden and violent death was more than just a crime, it was an unsettling loss that left many wondering, who would want him dead and why? James Calloway was born in San Diego, California in 1985. From an early age, he displayed the qualities that would later define him: discipline, resilience, and an unshakable sense of duty. Raised in a family with a long history of military service, it was no surprise when, at the age of 18, Jim enlisted in the United States Navy. Over the next 20 years, Jim built an illustrious career, serving in multiple deployments across the world. He specialized in naval intelligence and combat strategy, working on classified operations that required both physical and mental sharpness. His ability to remain calm under pressure earned him the respect of his peers and superiors alike. Throughout his service, Jim received several commendations, including the Navy Commendation Medal, awarded for his outstanding performance in intelligence operations; the Combat Action Ribbon, recognizing his direct engagement in hostile combat zones; the Good Conduct Medal, a testament to his unwavering discipline and dedication to the Navy's core values. Jim was also known for mentoring younger sailors, often guiding them through the challenges of military life. He believed that a strong team wasn't just built on skill but on trust and camaraderie, principles he upheld until his last day in service. After serving for 2 decades, Jim retired from active duty in 2021. But while he had left the military never truly left him. Like many veterans, adjusting to civilian life wasn't easy, but Jim was determined to make the transition smoothly. He moved to Norfolk, Virginia, a city with a strong Navy presence, where he began working as a security consultant. His job involved helping private companies strengthen their security protocols. His expertise in intelligence made him a sought-after professional in the field. But Jim's true passion lay in helping fellow veterans. He actively participated in veteran outreach programs, offering mentorship and guidance to those struggling with post-military life. Whether it was job placement, mental health support, or simply lending a listening ear, Jim was always there. He wasn't just a veteran, he was a lifeline for so many of us, said Danny Carter, Jim's closest friend and fellow Navy veteran. Whenever someone needed help, Jim was the guy who showed up. That's just who he was. Despite his contributions, those closest to Jim noticed something troubling in the months leading up to his murder. He had become paranoid. Friends recalled him making vague comments about being followed or watched. At first, they assumed it was just the effects of military life catching up to him. Now they weren't so sure. Jim wasn't just respected, he was loved. His family described him as the type of person who put others before himself, a natural protector who always ensured his loved ones were safe. His younger sister, Emily Calloway, remembered him as her hero. Jim was the guy who could do anything. When we were kids, I thought he was invincible. Even when he went off to war, I never worried because I knew he'd always come back. But now he's gone and none of it makes sense. His colleagues at the security firm spoke highly of him, emphasizing his professionalism and strong moral compass. According to Mark Holloway, his supervisor, Jim had this presence about him. He was sharp, reliable, and always went the extra mile. If there was ever a guy you wanted in your corner, it was him. Despite his composed exterior, Jim's closest friends sensed something had been weighing on him. He wasn't the same Jim, Danny Carter admitted. There was this tension in him, like he was always looking over his shoulder. I asked him about it once and he just brushed it off. Said he was fine. But I could tell he wasn't. The news of Jim Calloway's murder didn't just make headlines, it shook the entire city. Norfolk had seen its share of crime, but the murder of a decorated Navy veteran was different. People who knew Jim couldn't understand how a man who had survived war zones and combat missions could meet such a tragic fate in his own city. The idea that someone like Jim could be killed like this? It's terrifying, said Sarah Mitchell, the woman who discovered his body. It makes you wonder, if it could happen to him, could it happen to anyone? Local law enforcement felt the pressure to solve the case quickly. Detective Robert Lawson, the lead investigator, acknowledged that this wasn't just another homicide, it was a case that demanded answers. This isn't just about one man's death. It's about justice for someone who dedicated his life to protecting others. We owe it to him. As theories began circulating, people speculated about who could have wanted Jim dead. Could it have been a robbery gone wrong? A personal vendetta? Something related to his military past? The more investigators dug, the more they realized this wasn't a simple case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. The Ace of Spades card found at the crime scene added another layer of mystery. Many saw it as a clear message, but from whom? And why? As the investigation unfolded, one thing became clear. Jim Calloway was no random victim. Someone had planned this. Someone had targeted him. And if Jim's paranoia in the weeks leading up to his murder was any indication, he knew it was coming. It was a cold, quiet night in Norfolk, Virginia, a city known for its naval presence and tight-knit military community. But on the evening of March 14, 2023, the tranquility was shattered when a gruesome discovery sent shockwaves through the town. A call came into the local police department at 10:47 p.m. A distressed voice on the other end of the line reported finding a body near an abandoned warehouse just outside the downtown district. The caller, Sarah Mitchell, a 29-year-old waitress walking home from her late-night shift, initially thought she had come across a homeless man sleeping on the ground. But as she stepped closer, a wave of panic surged through her. There was no movement, no sound, just eerie stillness. Fighting back fear, she dialed 911, her voice trembling as she told the dispatcher, I think there's a man here. He's not moving. I don't know if he's breathing. Please, you have to send someone now." When first responders arrived, the scene was nothing short of chilling. The victim, later identified as James "Jim" Calloway, a 38-year-old Navy veteran, lay lifeless near the entrance of the old mill warehouse, a deteriorating structure that had long been abandoned. The location itself raised immediate questions. Why would a man like Jim, with no known criminal ties, be in such a desolate place? Had he been lured there? Jim's body was found lying on his back, his arms positioned unnaturally at his sides. At first glance, there were no obvious signs of a struggle. His clothes were slightly disheveled, but nothing appeared torn or excessively damaged. His wallet, watch, and phone were still on him, ruling out a robbery. But something was off. His boots were muddy, even though the immediate area was dry, suggesting he had walked through another location before ending up here. Nearby, officers found a half-smoked cigarette, still fresh, as if someone had been there moments before Sarah discovered the body. But the most disturbing detail? A single playing card placed near Jim's hand, the Ace of Spades, historically associated with death in military circles. Whether it was left as a message or merely coincidence, investigators knew one thing: this was no ordinary crime. Sarah Mitchell was in shock when officers arrived. She could barely speak as she recounted what she had seen. Detectives quickly noted that she had no apparent connection to the victim, nor did she have any reason to be in the area other than her usual route home. During questioning, she provided an eerie detail. "I had this weird feeling before I saw him. It's hard to explain, but I felt like someone was watching me. I even looked around, but I didn't see anyone. and then there he was, just lying there. I knew right away something was wrong. Could the person who left Jim there still have been nearby, watching from the shadows? It was a chilling thought, but one that detectives couldn't ignore. The first officer on the scene, Detective Rob Lawson, was a seasoned investigator with over 2 decades on the force. But even for him, something about this case felt different. The lack of defensive wounds on the victim suggested one of two things. Either Jim had been taken by surprise, or he had trusted his attacker enough not to resist. Paramedics quickly confirmed the worst. Jim had been dead for several hours before Sarah found him. However, the cause of death wasn't immediately clear. There was no gunshot wound, no stab wounds, and no obvious signs of blunt force trauma. It was as if his body had simply shut down. But how? As the forensic team examined the scene, one key detail stood out. There was barely any blood. If Jim had been killed here, there should have been some sign of a struggle. Yet the area was eerily clean. This led to a grim realization. He wasn't murdered here. He was brought here. This changed everything. Jim's real crime scene was elsewhere, meaning someone had carefully moved his body to this location. But why? Was it to send a message? Or had the killers simply needed a remote location to dispose of him? As detectives dug into Jim Calloway's background, they struggled to find a motive. He had no known enemies, no criminal record, and no history of involvement with dangerous people. However, when speaking to his best friend and fellow veteran Danny Carter, a troubling detail emerged. According to Danny, Jim had recently confided in him about something unsettling. "He told me he thought he was being followed," Danny said. "At first, I told him he was probably just being paranoid. You know, sometimes we get that way after everything we've been through in the military. But now I wonder if he was right." This revelation sent the investigation in a new direction. Was Jim targeted? And if so, by whom? Detectives pulled security footage from a nearby gas station, hoping to find anything unusual from the night before Jim's death. What they found made their blood run cold. At 9:15 p.m., just hours before his body was discovered, the footage showed Jim at a 24-hour convenience store, appearing agitated. He kept glancing over his shoulder as if expecting someone to be behind him. And then, at the edge of the frame, there it was, a man in a dark hoodie standing completely still, watching Jim from a distance. This figure never approached, never spoke, just stood there, staring. When detectives enhanced the footage, they were able to get a better look at the man's face. He was middle-aged, with sharp features and piercing eyes. But despite their best efforts, they had no match in the criminal database. For now, he was simply an unknown suspect, a ghost haunting Jim's final moments. As investigators continued their search for answers, they discovered another strange detail. A mysterious phone number was found written on a piece of paper in Jim's pocket. When detectives traced it, they found that it belonged to a burner phone, making it nearly impossible to track. Additionally, mud found on Jim's boots didn't match the ground at the warehouse. Instead, forensic testing suggested it came from a wooded area miles away, leading detectives to believe that Jim had been somewhere else, possibly struggling for his life, before his body was left at the crime scene. But perhaps the most disturbing clue of all was found in Jim's apartment, which investigators searched the following morning. On his desk was a handwritten note, as if he had been trying to leave a message before something happened to him. Read, "If anything happens to me, look into Vaughn." The name Eric Vaughn was not familiar to Jim's family or friends. But as detectives dug deeper, they uncovered a link. Vaughn had once served in the Navy alongside Jim. Had something happened between them during their service? Was there a grudge, a buried secret that had come back to haunt Jim? With more questions than answers, one thing was clear. Jim Calloway's murder was not random. It was personal. And the deeper detectives looked, the darker the case became. From the moment Detective Rob Lawson and his team arrived at the crime scene, they knew this wasn't an ordinary homicide. Jim Calloway wasn't just any victim. He was a former Navy intelligence officer, a man who had spent his life in high-stakes situations. The manner in which his body was discovered, carefully positioned, no clear signs of struggle, and with an ace of spades card nearby, made it clear that this crime wasn't random. Initially, investigators considered 3 main possibilities. 1. A robbery gone wrong. Since Jim was found with all of his valuables still on him, his wallet, watch and phone, this theory seemed unlikely. However, it wasn't completely ruled out, as it was possible the crime was interrupted before the perpetrator could take anything. 2. A personal vendetta. Given Jim's military background and post-service career in security consulting, detectives explored the possibility that someone held a grudge against him. Could this have been an act of revenge from someone he had crossed paths with? 3. A professional hit. The ace of spades card left at the scene suggested something more sinister. In military circles, the ace of spades has long been associated with death. Was this a calling card left by a contract killer? As law enforcement delved deeper, they realized that Jim may have sensed danger before his death. His best friend, Danny Carter, had already told detectives that Jim believed he was being watched. This revelation pushed investigators to consider that Jim might have been targeted by someone he knew, or at least someone who knew him well enough to track his movements. The forensic team made several key discoveries at the scene. 1. Minimal blood at the scene. This confirmed detectives' suspicion that Jim had been killed elsewhere before being moved to the warehouse. 2. Toxicology report findings. The medical examiner found traces of an unknown substance in Jim's bloodstream, suggesting he may have been drugged before his death. 3. Mud on Jim's boots. The soil didn't match the area around the warehouse. Instead, it was consistent with the soil found in Woodland Creek Park, a secluded area 5 miles away. These findings indicated that Jim had likely been taken to another location, possibly the park, before his body was left at the warehouse. But why? And by whom? Investigators turned to Jim's inner circle for clues. Several people provided valuable insight into his final days. Danny Carter, best friend. Jim told me he thought he was being followed. He didn't want to talk about it too much, but I could tell something was wrong. He wasn't sleeping well and he was drinking more than usual. He even said, "If something happens to me, check my notes." Emily Calloway, sister. Jim had mentioned a name, Vaughn. I don't know who that is, but he told me once that if anything weird happened, that name would matter. Mark Holloway, security firm supervisor. Jim had been working on a private security case involving corporate espionage. He told me he was dealing with a very dangerous client, but I didn't press for details. I regret that now. These statements led detectives to search Jim's apartment, where they found a notebook containing detailed observations about a man named Eric Vaughn, a former Navy colleague. A quick search revealed that Eric Vaughn had served with Jim in the Navy before being dishonorably discharged under mysterious circumstances. Vaughn had disappeared from public records after leaving the military, making it difficult for investigators to track him down. But they soon found another unsettling clue. A burner phone number was written on a piece of paper in Jim's pocket. Tracing the number led to a disconnected phone, but call records showed that Jim had attempted to contact this number 3 times the night before his death. Had Jim been trying to reach Vaughn? While detectives were making progress, there were several puzzling inconsistencies. 1. Why was Jim's body moved? If the murder was personal, why go through the trouble of transporting the body? Moving a body is risky, meaning the killer likely had a reason. 2. What did the ace of spades mean? Was it a message, a taunt, or a calling card for a hired killer? 3. Who was the hooded man? The security footage suggested someone had been stalking Jim. But was it Vaughn or someone else? Detectives knew they were missing a crucial piece of the puzzle. The case took a major turn when a local taxi driver came forward. He claimed he had picked up a man matching Jim's description near Woodland Creek Park on the night of the murder. The passenger seemed disoriented and weak, possibly drugged. He kept saying, "I need to get to Danny. He'll know what to do." But before they could leave, another man approached the taxi, flashed a badge and claimed to be law enforcement, demanding Jim exit the vehicle. Jim complied and the taxi driver drove away, only now realizing that the officer was likely an imposter. This revelation changed everything. Jim had been alive at Woodland Creek Park. Someone had stopped him from escaping. But who was the fake officer? Could it have been Vaughn? Or was there another player in the game? As detectives pieced together the evidence, it became clear. Jim Calloway's murder wasn't just personal. It was calculated. Someone had gone to great lengths to ensure his death looked like an accident or a mystery. And the deeper investigators dug, the more they realized Jim had known something dangerous. Something that got him killed. The question was, what was it? And who else was in danger? As the investigation into Jim Calloway's murder deepened, law enforcement faced a tangled web of potential suspects, conflicting accounts and eerie coincidences. From past military acquaintances to professional rivals, Jim's death wasn't just a random act of violence, it was a calculated attack, carried out with purpose. After piecing together Jim's final days, investigators narrowed their focus to 3 main suspects. 1. Eric Vaughn, a former Navy colleague with a troubled past. He had a history of violent behavior and was dishonorably discharged under suspicious circumstances. 2. Nathan Greer, a security contractor with ties to Jim's most recent case. The two had reportedly clashed over financial discrepancies in a high-profile job. 3. Sarah Mitchell, the woman who found Jim's body. Her timeline of events had inconsistencies, and some investigators questioned how she just happened to stumble upon the crime scene. While other minor figures emerged, these three individuals had the strongest links to the case, and each had potential motives that could explain why Jim was killed. The mention of Eric Vaughn in Jim's notebook sent up major red flags. Investigators quickly discovered that Vaughn had been involved in several classified Navy missions alongside Jim before his dishonorable discharge in 2017. Why was he kicked out? Vaughn was accused of selling classified intelligence to private contractors, a serious offense that could have led to treason charges. However, due to a lack of hard evidence, he avoided prison but was permanently discharged. Jim had been one of the officers who testified against Vaughn, essentially ruining his career. This revelation painted a clear motive: revenge. Adding to the suspicion, Vaughn had vanished from public records after his discharge. No known address, no active bank accounts, no social media. A ghost. When detectives finally tracked him down in Baltimore, Vaughn refused to cooperate and denied ever seeing Jim in recent years. "I don't know what kind of conspiracy you're trying to dig up, but I had nothing to do with Jim's death," Vaughn told investigators. However, Vaughn had no alibi for the night of Jim's murder, and his burner phone number matched the one found on Jim's body. Still, without direct evidence, police couldn't make an arrest. Nathan Greer worked in the same field as Jim, private security consulting. While on the surface they were colleagues, some sources suggested they were bitter rivals. A former business partner revealed that Jim and Nathan had worked together on a multi-million-dollar security contract for a high-profile corporate client. Jim later discovered financial fraud within the deal. Greer had allegedly overcharged the client by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Jim threatened to expose Greer, which would have destroyed his career. The timing was suspicious. Jim had told his friend Danny Carter that he was about to go public with damaging information. If Nathan Greer had caught wind of this, he had every reason to silence Jim before it was too late. When questioned, Greer claimed he was out of town on a business trip during the murder. However, no hotel records confirmed his stay. Surveillance footage from an airport security checkpoint showed him leaving the city later than he initially claimed. While not damning, these inconsistencies raised suspicions. At first, Sarah Mitchell was treated as an innocent witness. She had discovered Jim's body while walking her dog and immediately called 911. However, her story had some gaps. 1. She originally claimed she wasn't familiar with Jim. 2. Investigators later found emails between her and Jim discussing a sensitive matter. 3. Her timeline of the night's events didn't match the surveillance footage. Further digging revealed that Sarah worked as a contracted researcher for a private intelligence firm, the same firm that had hired Jim for his last security job. Could she have been involved in something bigger? "I had nothing to do with Jim's death. I tried to warn him," Sarah allegedly told detectives before lawyering up. Her cryptic statement left investigators with more questions than answers. Looking at the case as a whole, the main motives investigators considered were: 1. Revenge. Vaughn's motive. Vaughn had every reason to hate Jim. He had lost his career because of Jim's testimony. The Ace of Spades card could have been a symbolic message, referencing Vaughn's military past. 2. Financial dispute. Greer's motive. Jim was about to expose fraud in Greer's security business. Greer had a financial incentive to keep Jim quiet. His questionable alibi and airport footage made him a viable suspect. 3. Corporate cover-up. Sarah's potential involvement. Jim had recently worked on a sensitive case that could have involved corporate espionage. Sarah's emails with Jim suggested she knew something dangerous. She lawyered up quickly, refusing to give further statements. As detectives continued their interrogations, alibis began to crumble. Vaughn had no provable alibi and refused to disclose his whereabouts. Greer's alibi was partially disproven, but not enough for an arrest. Sarah was withholding key information, making her a person of interest. At this point, law enforcement was dealing with three major problems. 1. They had no murder weapon. 2. Jim's final movements were still unclear. 3. The killer was methodical and had left minimal forensic evidence. Throughout the case, multiple false leads wasted valuable time. An anonymous tip suggested Jim was involved in illegal arms deals, which turned out to be false. Early reports claimed Jim had gambling debts, but there was no financial evidence of this. A former Navy officer claimed Jim had been under government surveillance, but there were no official records supporting this theory. These red herrings complicated the investigation, but detectives kept coming back to the three main suspects. As weeks passed, the case remained unsolved, but the pressure to find Jim's killer intensified. One thing was clear. Jim had stumbled onto something dangerous, something worth killing for. But was this a personal act of revenge? A corporate hit? Or something even bigger? And if Jim had been silenced for what he knew, who would be next? After months of relentless investigation, multiple false leads, and growing frustration among law enforcement, a breakthrough in Jim Calloway's murder case finally came to light. The discovery was not the result of a confession or a tip from the public, but rather the painstaking work of detectives piecing together scattered fragments of evidence. And in the end, one key piece fell into place that would unravel the entire mystery. It was a routine forensic re-examination that brought the investigation to a shocking revelation. The forensic team had retested the toxicology samples from Jim's body, which had been previously overlooked. What they found was a compound that hadn't been identified in the earlier tests, a rare neurotoxin that caused disorientation and short-term memory loss. Upon further analysis, it became clear that this neurotoxin had been administered in small doses over a period of time, likely to subdue Jim and disorient him before his eventual death. The presence of the neurotoxin was a game-changer. It meant that someone had been controlling Jim's actions in the days leading up to his murder. The nature of the toxin suggested it was something highly specialized, only accessible to people with certain military or intelligence backgrounds. At first, law enforcement had been focused on Jim's recent security consulting work and financial disputes, but now the evidence pointed toward a more covert angle: intelligence operations. This wasn't just a personal vendetta. Someone had been systematically sabotaging Jim's ability to remember crucial details, perhaps to prevent him from revealing sensitive information. The neurotoxin discovery pointed to an even darker and more complex motive. Although no immediate confession came from any of the primary suspects, the discovery of the neurotoxin provided the forensic breakthrough law enforcement had been waiting for. But the most significant breakthrough came when a new witness unexpectedly came forward, someone whose involvement had not been previously considered. Detective Rob Lawson received an unexpected call one evening from Roger Benson, a retired military intelligence officer who claimed to have worked with Jim on a classified project years earlier. Benson had remained quiet for years, but after hearing about Jim's death, he realized something had been suspicious about Jim's involvement in a covert operation back in 2016. Benson revealed that during this operation, Jim had been exposed to a secret intelligence mission involving corporate espionage and military contractors. At the time, Jim had been investigating a shadowy network of defense contractors who were involved in illicit arms sales to hostile foreign governments. Jim had uncovered a deep web of corruption and criminal activity but had been forced to sign a non-disclosure agreement to protect both the agency and himself. According to Benson, Jim had been on the verge of blowing the whistle on the entire operation. However, as soon as Benson heard about the neurotoxin found in Jim's system, he immediately suspected that the nefarious players involved in the arms deals might have been behind Jim's murder. Jim was close to something big, Benson explained. If he had gone public with what he knew, it would have brought down a whole network of people involved in illegal arms trafficking. He was a threat to them. And I have no doubt that's why they silenced him. Benson's statement was chilling, and it opened up a whole new line of inquiry for investigators. It suggested that Jim's murder wasn't just a personal dispute or financial rivalry, but part of a larger conspiracy involving intelligence agencies and defense contractors with vast resources. As the investigation shifted focus, detectives revisited all of the evidence with a new lens. The neurotoxin discovered in Jim's system was linked to a rare chemical compound used by military contractors working in black operations. One such contractor, Vaughn Industries, a company with ties to both the government and private defense companies, came under immediate scrutiny. Law enforcement discovered that Vaughn Industries had hired several former military officers, including Eric Vaughn, to carry out covert operations, many of which were highly classified and dangerous. It wasn't a stretch to connect the dots. Jim's involvement with Vaughn Industries was no coincidence. He had been investigating the company before his death, and the potential cover-up surrounding his findings was becoming increasingly apparent. Further investigation revealed that Vaughn Industries had been under investigation by several government agencies for over a decade. Eric Vaughn had been involved in several illegal arms shipments to terrorist organizations, using his position to manipulate contracts and bypass security protocols. Jim had unknowingly uncovered evidence of these transactions. He was just days away from revealing the extent of Vaughn's involvement in these illegal activities when he was killed. Simultaneously, law enforcement found additional evidence suggesting that Nathan Greer, Jim's former colleague and business rival, had financial ties to Vaughn Industries. Greer had secretly worked as a consultant for Vaughn Industries and had access to confidential military contracts. Investigators now believed that Greer and Vaughn had collaborated to keep Jim from exposing their criminal operations. The final piece of the puzzle came when Sarah Mitchell, the initial witness who discovered Jim's body, was brought in for a second round of questioning. This time, she broke down and admitted that she had been manipulated by a shadowy figure associated with Vaughn Industries. She had been paid to monitor Jim, track his movements, and ensure that he didn't reveal what he knew about the company's illegal dealings. Sarah's role in the plot wasn't that of a direct killer, but her involvement was clear. She had been part of the cover-up. Sarah Mitchell was arrested for aiding and abetting in the murder, and the investigation into Eric Vaughn and Nathan Greer intensified. With the new witness testimony and the forensic findings, law enforcement was able to arrest Eric Vaughn for the murder of Jim Calloway. They also issued a warrant for Nathan Greer's arrest, as it was clear that he had been complicit in the cover-up and may have had direct involvement in orchestrating the murder. The arrest of Vaughn, along with the unraveling of his network, confirmed what investigators had suspected all along. Jim Calloway had been killed to protect a massive criminal operation that involved arms trafficking, espionage, and corporate corruption. The case sent shockwaves through both the military and corporate worlds, exposing a network of illicit dealings that had been operating under the radar for years. As Vaughn and Greer faced trial, the true scope of their crimes came to light. Jim Calloway, a decorated Navy veteran who had uncovered a dangerous conspiracy, had paid the ultimate price for his dedication to justice. His death, while tragic, had shined a light on a dark corner of the defense industry, and it was clear that his legacy would live on, not just as a hero but as someone who risked everything to uncover the truth. The case marked the end of a long, painful investigation, but for those who had known Jim, the closure was bittersweet. He had died for a cause, but justice had finally been served. The breakthrough in Jim Calloway's case, thanks to the discovery of crucial forensic evidence, key witness testimony, and the unveiling of a large, dangerous network, finally led to arrests. And, eventually, a public trial that would bring the long-awaited justice his family and the community had desperately hoped for. The trial of Eric Vaughn and Nathan Greer attracted widespread media attention due to the explosive nature of the case, ranging from high-level military conspiracies to criminal activity within private defense contractors. The courtroom was filled with emotionally charged moments, with Jim's family watching as the full scope of their loved one's tragic end came into focus. The prosecution's case was built around the evidence that Jim Calloway had uncovered illegal arms dealings tied to Vaughn Industries and the fact that he had been silenced before he could go public with what he knew. They introduced witness testimony, forensic evidence, and financial records showing that Vaughn Industries was involved in illicit transactions with foreign governments. They also presented the neurotoxin found in Jim's system, which was a rare compound that could only have been obtained by someone with military or intelligence ties, a point that placed the blame squarely on Vaughn, who had a direct connection to covert operations. Testimonies from former colleagues, including Roger Benson, a military intelligence officer, were pivotal in the prosecution's case. Benson testified about the covert operations Jim had been involved in and how those could have exposed a dangerous network of military corruption. Benson's statement that Jim had been on the verge of revealing highly sensitive information helped establish a clear motive for Vaughn and Greer. Additionally, Sarah Mitchell's testimony was a crucial part of the prosecution's case. After a tearful confession about being manipulated by Vaughn Industries to keep track of Jim's movements, Mitchell's statements corroborated the theory that Jim had been killed to prevent him from going public. The defense, however, focused on trying to cast doubt on the prosecution's theory. Eric Vaughn's defense team argued that there was no direct evidence linking him to the murder and that his actions could have been misinterpreted as part of a broader conspiracy involving multiple actors. They claimed that the neurotoxin found in Jim's system could have been administered by someone else, someone outside their circle, suggesting that the case had been orchestrated by a third party with their own agenda. Nathan Greer's defense took a similar tack. They contended that Greer had no motive to kill Jim, portraying him as a victim of circumstance caught up in an investigation he had no control over. They suggested that Greer had been wrongfully accused due to his financial dealings with Vaughn Industries but argued that there was no direct proof that he was involved in Jim's murder. Throughout the trial, the defense team worked hard to discredit the witness testimonies and point out inconsistencies in the investigation. They tried to create a narrative that the investigation had been rushed and that there were gaps in the evidence that left room for doubt. They also raised the possibility that Jim's murder might have been the result of an internal power struggle within the intelligence or defense community, rather than a personal vendetta. One of the most compelling moments in the trial came when Roger Benson took the stand. As a retired military officer and someone who had worked closely with Jim on several covert operations, Benson's testimony was irrefutable. He spoke in detail about the classified operations Jim had been involved in and how the information Jim had uncovered could have destroyed entire networks of arms deals. Benson's testimony added weight to the argument that Jim's death was not a mere act of vengeance but a calculated move to protect a much larger criminal operation. Additionally, the prosecution introduced surveillance footage from nearby cameras that had captured both Vaughn and Greer entering Jim's neighborhood on the night of his murder. This piece of evidence gave a crucial timeline to the case and helped tie them to the scene of the crime. After weeks of emotional testimony and mounting evidence, the jury finally deliberated. The verdict was delivered with bated breath. Eric Vaughn was found guilty of first-degree murder. Nathan Greer was also found guilty of murder and conspiracy, though his involvement was considered slightly less direct than Vaughn's. Sarah Mitchell was convicted of aiding and abetting and obstruction of justice, though she was given a reduced sentence due to her cooperation during the trial. The sentences were handed down with no surprises. Vaughn received a life sentence without the possibility of parole, while Greer was sentenced to 40 years in prison. Mitchell, who had cooperated with the investigation, received a reduced sentence of 15 years in a federal penitentiary. The Calloway family, who had been devastated by Jim's murder, expressed both relief and sorrow at the outcome of the trial. His sister, Emily, spoke to the press shortly after the verdict was announced, thanking the detectives for their tireless work in bringing Jim's killers to justice. Emily Calloway said, "While no sentence can bring Jim back, we are thankful that his name will be cleared and that the truth has finally come to light. Jim was a man who dedicated his life to serving his country, and I'm proud that his story will inspire others to stand for justice." The community was equally shaken. Jim's colleagues in the military and friends rallied around the family, praising Jim's bravery both during his military service and in his pursuit of the truth. However, there was also a sense of unease in the wider community. The case had revealed a level of corruption within the defense industry and government agencies that many had not known existed. Though justice was served, the case left a permanent scar on the community, a reminder of how far some would go to protect their secrets, and how those who fight for truth sometimes pay the highest price. Even though justice was served with the conviction of Eric Vaughn, Nathan Greer, and Sarah Mitchell, Jim Calloway's case left behind a trail of lingering questions and unresolved aspects that continue to puzzle both the community and the public. The trial may have come to a close, but the complexities of the case have left investigators and true crime enthusiasts alike pondering aspects that may never fully be answered. While the conviction of Eric Vaughn and Nathan Greer appeared to be a moment of closure for Jim Calloway's family and friends, some have questioned whether the right individuals were held fully accountable for the murder. The defense team for both Vaughn and Greer worked tirelessly to cast doubt on the prosecution's theory, especially focusing on the lack of direct physical evidence linking them to the actual moment of Jim's death. One of the main criticisms came from true crime enthusiasts who believed that the case against Vaughn was largely circumstantial. While the neurotoxin in Jim's system and the testimony of key witnesses provided a compelling case, some skeptics argued that the forensic evidence alone might not have been enough to definitively prove Vaughn's role in the murder. They pointed out that there was no direct witness testimony placing Vaughn at the crime scene, and the surveillance footage could have been misinterpreted or insufficient to prove intent. Some questioned whether Vaughn's role in Jim's murder was as calculated as it seemed or whether he was simply a scapegoat for a larger, more intricate conspiracy that extended beyond him and Greer. Could there have been a higher power pulling the strings, someone who managed to avoid the spotlight despite orchestrating the entire operation? For many, this question remained unresolved, leaving the conviction of Vaughn and Greer feeling incomplete. Additionally, the role of Sarah Mitchell, while pivotal in the cover-up, was also debated. Was she truly just a pawn in a larger scheme, or was there a more personal, hidden motivation behind her actions? Some speculated that Mitchell may have been involved in a deeper conspiracy that went beyond monitoring Jim's movements. Had she been manipulated, or was she more active in orchestrating the murder than the court proceedings suggested? Even though the main perpetrators were convicted, many aspects of the case left unresolved questions that have fueled ongoing speculation. Perhaps the biggest mystery is the exact nature of the conspiracy that led to Jim's murder. The involvement of Vaughn Industries and its ties to military intelligence and corporate espionage painted a picture of a much larger operation at play, one that wasn't fully unraveled during the trial. One of the most significant questions that remains unanswered is whether Jim was the only target in this web of corruption. Had others been silenced in the same way, or was Jim an isolated case? Could there have been other whistleblowers or individuals with information that might have been eliminated to prevent the disclosure of state secrets? Some believe that Jim's death might have been part of a broader cover-up designed to protect more than just arms deals and illegal trafficking. It could have been designed to safeguard sensitive government operations or to silence potential leaks of classified information. A further mystery that emerged during the investigation, and was never fully explained, was the neurotoxin used to incapacitate Jim. Forensic analysis confirmed its use, but the origins of the neurotoxin remained hazy. Investigators were unable to trace exactly where or how Vaughn or Greer had acquired it. Some even wondered if the neurotoxin was part of a wider stockpile kept by an organization more powerful than a single defense contractor. Was it part of a governmental or intelligence program, or was it an independent effort by a clandestine group with interests that reached far beyond the scope of the case? Another unanswered question revolves around Sarah Mitchell's role in the murder. She was a key witness in the case, but her motivations were never fully explored. Was she guilty of complicity, or was she coerced into participating in the conspiracy? What exactly did Vaughn and Greer promise her in exchange for her assistance, and why did she stay silent for so long before coming forward? Despite her confession and reduced sentence, Mitchell's true level of involvement remains clouded by uncertainty. The twists and turns of the Calloway case have sparked numerous theories among true crime enthusiasts, many of whom continue to investigate the case even after the convictions. Some of the more popular theories include: 1. A larger government conspiracy. Some enthusiasts believe the case was much more than a simple murder for revenge. Given the military ties of Vaughn and the involvement of shadowy contractors, they speculate that Jim's investigation into illegal arms deals and corruption could have uncovered government-level secrets. They suggest that higher-ranking officials may have been behind the murder to keep these secrets buried. The use of the neurotoxin could be seen as a signature of government-backed covert operations, which had previously been employed in similar cases involving national security. 2. The silent mastermind theory. Another theory gaining traction is the idea that someone else, an individual not directly connected to Vaughn or Greer, could have been the true mastermind behind Jim's murder. Some point to the complex web of connections between military intelligence, private defense contractors, and international arms trafficking. In this theory, Vaughn and Greer were pawns in a much larger game, manipulated by a shadowy figure who wanted to keep Jim from revealing sensitive information. 3. A setup for someone else. Another lingering theory suggests that Vaughn and Greer might not have been the primary culprits after all. Some point out the lack of direct physical evidence connecting them to the actual murder and suggest that someone framed them to protect the real killer. This theory posits that the neurotoxin and circumstantial evidence could have been planted by someone with the means and expertise to mislead the investigation. 4. The financial motivations theory. Some investigators believe the motive behind Jim's murder was purely financial. Nathan Greer's ties to Vaughn Industries raised questions about whether Greer was involved in a scheme to profit from Jim's death, potentially involving secret government contracts. This theory suggests that the death could have been orchestrated as part of a larger financial cover-up to prevent Jim from exposing a lucrative business operation. Despite the convictions, the mystery surrounding Jim Calloway's death remains clouded with unanswered questions. While the justice system held those directly involved accountable, the true extent of the conspiracy may never be fully known. The case continues to intrigue both investigators and the true crime community, fueling theories and speculation that will likely persist for years to come. In the end, while Jim's family and community found some solace in the convictions, the deeper mysteries surrounding the case suggest that there are still many dark corners yet to be explored. The murder of Jim Calloway not only shattered the lives of those closest to him but also left a lasting impact on the wider community. It was a tragedy that reverberated far beyond the loss of one decorated Navy veteran. The case brought attention to the hidden dangers lurking within private defense contracts, government secrets, and corruption at the highest levels. It prompted changes in laws, policies, and ultimately altered the course of many lives. But for Jim's family, the aftermath was far more personal and heart-wrenching. For Emily Calloway, Jim's sister, the aftermath of her brother's murder was a complicated mix of grief, anger, and an overwhelming sense of loss. While the convictions of Vaughn, Greer, and Mitchell provided a semblance of justice, nothing could truly replace the man she had loved, or undo the pain her family had endured. She often spoke publicly about the emotional toll the investigation and trial took on her family. "Jim's death will never make sense to me, and I will never truly get over losing him," Emily said in one of her public interviews after the trial. The community, especially those in Jim's hometown, were shaken to their core. He had been a well-respected figure in both military and civilian circles. His neighbors, colleagues, and friends were horrified by the revelation that someone with Jim's reputation for honor and integrity could be caught up in something as dark as the conspiracy surrounding his murder. It became a community-wide mourning, not just for the loss of one individual, but for the sense of betrayal and corruption that followed. The case ignited a firestorm of public discussion regarding private military contractors and their influence on government activities. The investigation into Vaughn Industries revealed serious gaps in the regulation of military contractors, especially those involved in arms trafficking and covert operations. The impact of Jim's murder reached beyond his immediate family and friends. It sparked debates in legislative circles about the oversight of these private entities, as well as the vulnerability of whistleblowers like Jim, who exposed corruption and illegal activity. As a result of the case, several policy changes were enacted. Congress passed new regulations on the oversight of private defense contractors, including more stringent requirements for transparency and accountability in their dealings with governments. The legal framework surrounding the protection of whistleblowers was also strengthened, with new laws ensuring greater safeguards for those who expose corruption in both the private and public sectors. These changes were aimed at creating a safer environment for those who risk everything to report wrongdoing, preventing future tragedies like Jim's from happening again. The case also sparked broader discussions on military corruption, the secrecy of government operations, and the corruption of private companies that profit from military contracts. These conversations extended to the public and were often featured in news outlets and documentaries that examined the growing threat of corruption within the defense industry. For many, Jim's murder became emblematic of the risks associated with unregulated military power and the dangers faced by those who challenge it. In reflecting on the tragedy of Jim Calloway's murder, it is clear that his life, service, and untimely death symbolized much more than an isolated incident. His case underscored the corruption and secrecy that can exist within the defense and military industries and the devastating consequences that can arise from these hidden networks of power. It showed that even someone as brave and honorable as Jim Calloway could become entangled in a web of dark forces, all because he dared to speak out against wrongdoing. Jim's death, while a devastating tragedy, also highlighted the strength of the human spirit in the face of immense loss. His family, despite enduring years of pain and uncertainty, found a way to keep his memory alive through advocacy, public awareness, and remembrance. They were committed to ensuring that Jim's name would not be forgotten and that his fight for truth would continue to inspire others to stand up for justice, no matter the cost. For the community, the case left behind a sense of unease, but also a realization that corruption and secrecy cannot be allowed to fester unchecked. Jim Calloway's murder was not just a story of one man's death. It was a reminder of the importance of accountability in all sectors, particularly when it comes to those who wield the power of the military and government. In the end, the aftermath of Jim's murder was a complicated and often painful journey for his family, friends, and community. But it also brought about a change in the way the country viewed private military contractors, government secrecy, and whistleblower protection. Though the pain of Jim's loss will never fully disappear, his sacrifice played a crucial role in shedding light on an often overlooked issue and creating a more transparent, accountable system for the future. The tragic death of Jim Calloway remains a haunting case that exposes the dark side of corruption, power, and secrecy within the military-industrial complex. Jim, a respected Navy veteran and whistleblower, was murdered after uncovering illegal activities tied to high-level government and defense contractors. His case, while bringing justice to some extent with the convictions of Eric Vaughn, Nathan Greer, and Sarah Mitchell, left many unanswered questions that continue to linger in the shadows. The investigation uncovered disturbing truths about private military contractors, covert government operations, and the lengths some will go to protect their interests. Though justice was served in the courtroom, Jim's family, friends, and the wider community continue to feel the reverberations of his untimely death. The case exposed the vulnerabilities of whistleblowers and the risks they face when they attempt to expose corruption. It led to significant changes in policies related to defense contractor oversight and whistleblower protections, making it clear that Jim's death was not in vain. Still, many questions remain unanswered, and the full scope of the conspiracy that led to his murder may never be fully understood. As we reflect on this case, We must consider the broader implications for those who dare to speak truth to power, as well as the dangers posed by unchecked military contractors and government secrecy. Jim's legacy serves as a reminder of the importance of transparency, accountability, and the need to protect those who stand up for justice, no matter the cost. But the story doesn't end here. Do you think justice was truly served in this case? Were the right people held accountable, or is there more to this conspiracy than we'll ever know? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your opinions on the case and the unanswered questions that still surround it. If you found this case intriguing, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth investigations into true crime stories like this one. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you'll never miss a new video. Your support helps us continue to bring these stories to light and dive deep into the mysteries that shape our world. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.